Okay, we're coming to the end of this series of videos. We're on to number 15, and this one's labelled HTML5 and CSS3. That's kind of a big ask of any system, but actually I'm not going to go through the whole of HTML5 and CSS3, and this is actually going to be relatively short. You can see here W3 School's gone on about this enough. You really should know that this is the centre of all information you should be referring to. HTML5 is obviously the fifth rendition of HTML, and if you go to W3 Schools, references, whatever else, find the HTML5, you'll find this list of all of the commands that, where it says new, these are all new commands available to HTML5. You'll find ones that have been wiped out, frames have died. Anyone still using frames, please stop. And we go down to all these other commands. So strikes out but source is in, and in fact we'll have a look at source in a second. CSS3 also goes along with HTML5. CSS3 is a new one. W3 Schools doesn't separate it out because CSS3 adds quite a bit to CSS, but actually 1, 2 have just been extended with 3, while 5 is a major rewrite in many ways. There are certain things like border radiuses that are introduced. They don't work in all browsers at the moment. There's a lot of HTML5 and CSS that still does not work in all browsers. It's still to be implemented. There are browsers that work with most of it. Firefox, Chrome is pretty good, and there are ones that really don't like HTML5 in many ways. There are errors with Internet Explorer, for example. Along with JavaScript, you'll often hear this referred to as Web 2 technology, and it's really worth noting, up until recently, if you ever wanted to do anything really clever, animation and everything else, you had to rely on plug-in devices, and one of the most popular ones was a Flash document, so you got Flash games and everything else. The problem with things like Flash games is they do require this plugin. They need it to be up to date, and it does need your browser to be compatible with it. And with mobile phones, it can be temperamental. It's very difficult for your browser to control what these things are asking for. They can fall over very easily, and particularly phone manufacturers didn't want to have all the error trapping that existed. They wanted a simple structure, and to be honest, from a designer's point of view, so do we. So HTML5, CSS3 and JavaScript all form together to create this Web 2 technology where you don't need things such as Flash. I've got a couple of examples here that are nice to look at. This is called Run Patrol, and actually I only just found it through a search, but it's actually quite an interesting thing. You are this little thing swimming around the universe, and every now and then you'll come across someone, and then you can type a word in and that will appear, and off you go. The interesting thing with this is not what you can do with it, but that this is not, if I right click, normally if this was Flash, it would tell me about Flash. It doesn't. It's showing me that this is an image, but actually the whole thing is being controlled through JavaScript and also being handled through CSS and HTML5. Another example of that is this. This one, again, if you look at that, we can inspect the element and everything else, but it's not got the Flash documentation. And here is a standard game, and there we go. Oh, what a crummy game. Okay, only because I didn't get the shot in. But those are incredibly useful. So, what am I going to show you with this? Well, I just want to show you some of the elements you can do with this. Originally, to include audio in a system, you had to go off and probably create a Flash document. That meant you had to learn Flash and something called ActionScript. It really was complex. This is the web page that we ended with last time, and this is the web page that we created last time. All I've done now is I've created a folder structure. So there's a file called index in here. There's two folders, the CSS folder. In there I haven't got divs.css, I've now got example.css, so I've changed the reference in the link in the meta section of my page. I've also got files, and in files I've got a single MP3 file. This is a set audio file just to show you how this works. That's the web page. When I run that web page, this comes up. All I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to introduce a new command, and as you can see, all I did was bring that back in. This is audio. This is a new thing with HTML5. Before, to get audio working was a nightmare. Now all I need is the audio tag. I define a source line which tells it where my file is, what kind of file, and I can have several of these. The text is purely for people who don't have a browser that works with HTML5 and with the audio command. Let's have a look at what that does. If I reload the page, there's an audio player, gives me the controls, and I can play the audio. Just in case you can hear that, it comes through, got all the volume controls, mutes, and so on and so forth. That really is HTML5 and CSS3. It takes over with JavaScript, something we haven't looked at, but something we will look at in another series of videos. And those three things together will give you a website that does not require Flash, where you can potentially do anything. Once you introduce things like PHP and MySQL into that, you can build incredibly complex websites with very, very little extension to what we've already learned. So I hope that's been really useful. Introduction to HTML5 through there and CSS3. Very, very brief, but just to get you to understand that it really is worth learning now.